Proposed federal Medicaid changes being debated on Capitol Hill could lead to tens of thousands of New Mexican residents losing their health care coverage. Albuquerque motels with a track record of crime, code violations, or unpaid taxes could soon face steep fines, restrictions on guest occupancy, and new record-keeping rules under a new law passed by the City Council. Left in the aftermath of a hellacious fire in an industrial area off Interstate 25 in Albuquerque are husks of scorched vehicles, mobile homes, and charred pallets. P&M's parent company CEO is stepping down amid acquisition speculation. And the Federal Aviation Administration has initiated an investigation into Las Cruces International Airport based off allegations that a city employee is performing duties which they are not qualified for. From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. Today's Thursday, May 15th, and I'll have more on those stories plus the weather forecast on the other side of this break.
This episode is brought to you by the Kirtland Partnership Committee. For 30 years, we've been dedicated to supporting, growing, and preserving the Kirtland National Security Complex. We work tirelessly to enhance military readiness, foster community partnerships, improve quality of life, and promote economic development right here in New Mexico. Join us in our mission to ensure that Kirtland remains a cornerstone of national security and a key provider of quality jobs and investment for all of Greater Albuquerque. Together, we can make a powerful impact. Kirtland Partnership Committee, proudly shaping the future of our national security for 30 years.
Proposed federal Medicaid changes being debated on Capitol Hill could lead to tens of thousands of New Mexico residents losing their health care coverage, according to a state agency analysis. With more on this story, we now turn to Journal Capitol Bureau Chief Dan Boyd. Dan, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Dan, this has been a topic you and I have discussed numerous times on the podcast, but with New Mexico having such a high population number that is under Medicaid coverage, any discussions or budget proposals about slashing Medicaid coverage would have significant repercussions here in New Mexico.
Yeah, this is something that legislators, the governor, state officials have been closely watching, in recent months. As you mentioned, New Mexico is arguably the most vulnerable state when it comes to federal Medicaid cuts or reductions, just given the fact that about 40% of our population is enrolled in Medicaid. So we've been kind of waiting for a little more, clarity on what those proposals might be on the federal level and what impact they might have. And this week we have seen, a plan, at least in the U.S. House, kind of unveiled and starting to move forward, and got some interesting data and analysis from the state about kind of what that, what impact that could have if it's, ultimately signed into law.
So just to put some numbers out there for our listeners, as you mentioned, Dan, 40% of the state's population under Medicaid coverage. So that's over 90,000 New Mexicans that could lose their health care coverage. And as far as what Congress is debating and the changes that they could bring, can you enlighten us a little bit, Dan, on what those are?
Yeah, so a lot of these changes that are being proposed, at least at this point in Congress, include, work requirements for people who are receiving Medicaid would be 80 hours a month for certain adults to remain, eligible and covered by Medicaid. Also, they would change some of the administrative requirements. You'd have to sign up more often, kind of eligibility checks, things like that. So those are things that Republicans have pushed, said, that those are fair if you're going to be receiving these services. The concern that a lot of state officials and legislative officials have is, the effect of those is that a lot of people end up getting kicked off, either because they, don't, enroll in time, or there's issues with their enrollment, or just they can't meet those work requirements. So that's where those numbers, you cited come from. And the question then would be, if 90,000 people lose Medicaid coverage, are they uninsured, or where do they get coverage from? So state officials still kind of figuring out, the answers to those questions, but certainly some pretty dark implications.
And Dan, you've mentioned a couple times during this interview that we've heard pushback from state officials, whether that be from the governor or lawmakers here in New Mexico. So a lot of resistance building around this idea of slashing Medicaid.
Yeah, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has been very vocal about this. She's been on some national television shows, been kind of doing the rounds. She was on Face the Nation this weekend, and she was asked during that interview if she would consider revisiting the state's decision to expand Medicaid. That was actually made by her predecessor, Susana Martinez. And she said, that she would not consider that. That was kind of a non-starter a little bit, that she planned to continue that Medicaid expansion. But I thought it was interesting. She did say, that there may be some efficiencies, some wasteful spending within the state's healthcare system that could be kind of examined in an attempt to kind of soften the impact of these, proposed changes.
And we've talked a lot about how these proposed budget cuts and plans could affect residents here in New Mexico, but on the other side of that coin, Dan, is practitioners here in the state as well. New Mexico already facing a shortage when it comes to doctors in the state, and this could worsen the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a big concern that a lot of legislators have. We've talked about the debate at the Roundhouse over medical malpractice and those type of issues. It's no secret that New Mexico's already been dealing with the healthcare provider shortage. Some legislators this week during a a committee hearing are saying, that they're really worried that even if any providers were to close their doors or to leave the state, due to these Medicaid cuts, that would be a big deal. Already, or people are having a hard time accessing healthcare in New Mexico. And according to some of the, analysis that we talked about earlier, they're saying that more than 100 providers, safety net providers around the state could be at risk of closing, due to these changes. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
And Dan, last question before I let you get out of here. We've talked a lot about how this is a proposed budget, but do we have a timeline on when we expect Congress to act on this?
Yeah, my understanding is House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that he wants the House to vote on this, I think, by Memorial Day. So, pretty soon here. But then obviously, even if it passes, it would have to go over to the U.S. Senate. So and that's far, a slam dunk that they would then approve this. They may well make changes to it. And then it would obviously have to go to President Trump's desk for approval. So certainly, I think there's a good possibility this could still evolve and change as it moves forward. I think even, some Republicans have expressed misgivings about Medicaid cuts. But, that said, there is kind of this target of trying to come up with savings and only certain ways to kind of reach that goal. So I would expect, some kind of reductions to Medicaid to be included in that final bill. But what those ultimately look like, we're still not quite clear on that.
So it should be interesting to see how this issue continues to evolve over the coming weeks as Congress debates it. Journal Capitol Bureau Chief Dan Boyd sharing how these proposed cuts could affect New Mexicans. Thank you so much, Dan.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
The Albuquerque City Council has passed a new ordinance targeting motels with repeated issues related to crime, code violations, or unpaid taxes. Aimed at improving public safety and cracking down on what officials call, quote, problematic properties, the law introduces a set of penalties and operational requirements for motels that meet specific criteria. The law narrowly passed with a 5-4 vote on May 5th. It allows the city to place motels on a so-called, quote, bad list if they fail to pay lodgers' taxes or hospitality fees for 3 consecutive months. Motels that have at least 3 city ordinance violations within a year or commit 1 violation under the city's nuisance abatement ordinance will also be placed on the list. Once listed, motels could face civil fines up to $500 per day, occupancy restrictions, or property liens. Motels on the list will also be required to maintain detailed guest records for 45 days, including photo identification, vehicle information, and payment details. This measure is intended to assist law enforcement, especially in identifying and preventing human trafficking, an issue city officials say have surfaced in several motels that were previously shut down.
Specifically, the reason for this, or the rationale given it, I should say,
my colleague Justin Garcia covers local government for the Journal,
was that Director of Planning Alan Varela said that a lot of times when they shut these very problematic motels down, they often find instances of human trafficking. Now, he didn't have any details about kind of specifics around those instances, but that was one of the rationale given.
The ordinance builds on Albuquerque's recent efforts to close high-crime motels. Officials say they have already shut down 6, including the Court John Motel in the North Valley, which had nearly 1,000 police calls within 2 blocks and numerous safety violations. The rooms there were reportedly rented long-term without working plumbing, exposed wiring, pest infestations, and lacked valid occupancy certifications. Planning Director Alan Varela emphasized that the law is not a blanket measure, but targets only the most problematic businesses. Enforcement will remain complaint-driven rather than proactive. Still, city officials, including Code Compliance Manager Angelo Mesker, urge motel owners to reach out for help to avoid penalties and bring their properties into compliance. In other headlines from the newsroom, a massive fire erupted Tuesday in an industrial area near I-25 in Albuquerque, leaving behind a scene of destruction with scorched vehicles, mobile homes, and charred pallets. The fire, which started around 5:30 p.m. near Comanche and Edith Northeast, was reported to have begun in a stack of pallets and quickly spread to nearby structures and vehicles, fueled by strong winds. Flames and thick black smoke were visible for miles, drawing onlookers and slowing traffic through nearby construction zones. Albuquerque Fire and Rescue and Bernalillo County Fire Rescue managed to bring the blaze under control within 2 hours, but not before it destroyed 2 mobile homes, 2 semi-truck trailers, 20 vehicles, and extensive pallet stacks. One person, the property owner, was injured. The cause of the fire is still under investigation by local and federal authorities, including the State Fire Marshal and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Pat Cowan, the long-serving CEO of TXNM Energy Incorporated, the parent company of Public Service Company of New Mexico, or PNM, is stepping down in July amid reports that global private equity firm Blackstone Incorporated is considering acquiring the publicly traded utility. Cowen will transition to executive chair, and Don Terry, PNM's current CEO and president, will take over as CEO of TXNM Energy. While the company framed the change as part of a long-standing succession plan, the timing closely follows reports of Blackstone's interest in a buyout. Terry's promotion positions him to lead TXNM through any potential acquisition, which would require state regulatory approval. Cowen, who joined the company in 2007 and became CEO in 2012, oversaw a major shift towards clean energy. PNM's renewable energy portfolio now makes up about 40% of its resources, a significant increase from 2008, driven in part by New Mexico's Energy Transition Act, mandating full decarbonization by 2045. The leadership change comes as private equity interests in New Mexico utilities raise concern about rate impacts for consumers, despite reassurances from the companies involved. And the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, is investigating Las Cruces International Airport over allegations that a city employee is performing federally regulated airport duties without proper training or qualifications, and that city leadership has blocked attempts to address the issue. A May 2nd letter from the FAA requests personnel training records and documentation on operational procedures, citing concerns under Part 139 Airport Certification Standards, which governs safety protocols at commercial airports. The FAA also alleges city leaders overruled airport management's efforts to implement corrective actions. The city has pledged to cooperate but declined to comment on specifics. Airport Advisory Board Chair Michael Rackey warned the investigation could threaten the airport certification, posing serious revenue and safety risks. The investigation also comes just weeks after the City Council approved a major airport expansion plan. If you like hearing all of the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal here on the Leading News, consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal. You can check our show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription and keep up with all the latest news from New Mexico's leading news source. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect sunny skies with a high near 78, and as for this evening, mostly clear with a low around 45. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. That's the Leading News. I'm Gino Gutierrez. We'll be back tomorrow.